I got to talk a little bit about Paul Krugman's latest piece. He titled it Mental Monetary Disorders. Or I don't know if this is the latest piece. This is from November 14th. I just didn't get a chance to read it until yesterday. Now, the real problem with this piece is not this piece, but the one that he refers to that he wrote over 10 years ago. But what Paul Krugman is trying to do is somehow dispel this the Austrian idea that printing money doesn't grow the economy, that just creating money out of thin air doesn't produce economic growth. And Paul Krugman thinks he's able to refute that with this ridiculous example that he cites in a piece that he wrote back in 1998. Now, if I had written something so stupid, the last thing I would want to do was remind anybody about it. I would have hoped that this thing got lost somewhere. But unfortunately, he decided to point it out. And so I clicked on it, and I just read it. In fact, I hadn't even read it until the break between the first hour of the show and this hour. But the thing is so stupid, it didn't take me more than a few minutes to realize how nonsensical his argument is. I mean, the whole thing is a joke, and the fact that Paul Krugman can even hold this out as some kind of example. I mean, we really, really have to think about the underlying intellectual capacity of Paul Krugman. But anyway, this is what the guy is saying. He's holding up some example of some crazy scheme that this New York co-ops came up with about babysitting. And here was their scheme, that if you babysat for somebody else in the co-op, you would earn a babysitting coupon that would entitle you to use that coupon to purchase the babysitting services of other people in your co-op. So it really was a trading situation. I watch your kids, you watch my kids. And the way they did it is you would earn coupons, and each coupon was good for an hour worth of babysitting. All right. Well, the bottom line is the plan didn't work because it turned out that a lot of people were hoarding their coupons. Some people wanted to save them up for special occasions, so they could never really get a balance between the people who wanted to babysit and the people who wanted to hire the babysitters. And of course, he claims that the reason it didn't work was that there weren't enough coupons and they had a liquidity problem. They didn't have a liquidity problem. They had a stupidity problem because the plan didn't work. You see, the basic problem is the plan assumes that an hour of babysitting is always worth the same. You see, they tried to price fix babysitting. Obviously, if you want to hire a babysitter on New Year's Eve, that is a lot more expensive than hiring them on a typical Tuesday night. In fact, babysitting on a Friday or a Saturday night is more expensive than on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. Just ask any babysitter. If you're going to ask a teenager to give up her Friday night, that's going to be more expensive. I mean, the whole idea was flawed from the start. You know, you had a bunch of yuppies that wanted to get out of having to pay babysitters, so they came up with this cockamamie scheme that backfired. And according to Paul Krugman, this proves that printing money works. Now, here's the funny thing. So apparently there was a shortage of these coupons. Of course there was a shortage of them because, people didn't want to babysit at certain times. And so people were trying to accumulate these undervalued coupons so they can use them at times when they really wanted babysitters. But of course, everybody wants babysitters on the same time. So the whole thing didn't work. And so what was their solution? Instead of admitting that the stupid scheme didn't work, they tried to postpone the pain by just printing new coupons for babysitting. And this is what Paul Krugman says proves that printing money works, because he said that the minute they had all these coupons, everything was great because now people were able to hire babysitters. Of course, because people were willing to babysit to earn these coupons so they can use them later on. Right, because there was some value supposedly behind these coupons in that they represented an hour worth of babysitting that you can obviously use on New Year's Eve when, of course, everybody would want to use them. And Paul Krugman, without even knowing it, admits that the plan doesn't work without even seeing it. Right? And I'm going to read from his article. He says that, so basically there were some economists in there, and the economists who were living at the co-op said we have a liquidity problem, and so we just need to issue more coupons. And he says the economists prevailed, more coupons were issued, couples became more willing to go out, opportunities to babysit multiplied, and everything was happy. Eventually, of course, the co-op issued too much script, leading to different problems. There's the eventually. He doesn't get into these problems. In other words, they created a bubble in babysitting as people rushed to earn all these coupons that they can use later on. But, of course, later on, you had too many people with coupons and then not enough people that actually would be willing to babysit. Because if everybody had coupons, then who was going to be there to babysit? Right? That was the problem. So their solution was, instead of admitting their mistakes, that they had a stupid system and abolishing it, they decided to try to inflate their way out of the problem, and they created a bubble that burst. In fact, Paul Krugman's very example proves the opposite of what he's trying to prove. Rather than Krugman proving that Pretty Money works and solves problems, he proves it doesn't work and creates even bigger problems. But of course, he fails to even mention what those bigger problems were in his piece. He simply focuses on the short term, that in the short run, yes, it seemed to work. But in the long run, it didn't. Well, that is the problem. All of his Keynesian, phony, monetary policies never work in the long run. They look like they work in the short run to people who are as foolish as Paul Krugman. Yes, we printed some money in the 1990s. It looked like it worked, but it turned out it was a stock market bubble. Then we printed more money in the next decade. It looked like it worked, but it turned out to be a housing bubble, and one that Paul Krugman himself was instrumental in urging on. And of course, now we're printing a bunch of money. We got a government bubble. It looks like it works, but of course it's going to pop even worse. Anyway, we'll be back. More open lines. We're taking your calls here on the Peter Schiff Show at schiffradio.com. This is such a beautiful analogy, and I just want to make really a home it in or pinpoint it down on Paul Krugman here. But basically, what Krugman is holding off as an example that Pretty Money works was the creation of a babysitting bubble to cover up for the stupid idea that the co-op had put in place. Rather than admitting that the system didn't work and disbanding it, they tried to inflate their way out of the problem. And so they temporarily worked because they created a bubble in babysitting coupons. Because once they issued a bunch of coupons, everybody wanted to earn those coupons so that they could store them up and use them later. But the problem is, once everybody had a stockpile of coupons for babysitting, they had no value because now nobody needed them anymore. And now everybody who had them wanted to give them to somebody else to babysit, but nobody wanted to earn them anymore because they already had a big stockpile of them. Everybody wanted to use them. Everybody wanted to use their coupons to hire a babysitter, but nobody needed them anymore, and everybody else wanted babysitters. So the whole bubble collapsed, and the babysitter coupons would have ended up being worthless. And that is the story. It is a perfect example of why Pretty Money doesn't work, yet Paul Krugman isn't even smart enough to understand it. He holds up an example that refutes his entire premise as supporting his premise. I mean, that he has reached a new low in stupidity or whatever it is. But again, I mean, there's got to be some kind of prize you can win for this, right? I've joked before about a Nobel Prize in economic idiocy. But I mean, hands down, I mean, how many times does Paul Krugman have to win this thing?
The Peter Schiff Show.